So this is where sort of things stand, where we have the nation of Israel, and then we have these occupied territories of the Gaza Strip and West Bank, and even to an extent the Golan Heights. In the late 1990s, Israel proposes what they call land for peace. That they say, okay, we're tired of fighting. How about this, Palestinians? They offer almost 90% of that territory in sort of that darker mustard color. We will give you back the land if there will be no more fighting. We don't want to fight. Now, Israel wants all of this. They feel that all of this belongs to them, but they are more interested in peace. The problem is the Palestinians say, no, it's not good enough. And this leads to the beginning of the Second Intifada in 2000, a second uprising. But what's different about this uprising, it's not just the civilians, but it's sort of terror organization, groups that are supported by other countries inciting the violence. So groups like Hamas in the Gaza Strip, or we have Fatah in the West Bank, or Hezbollah in Syria. We have these groups supported by the neighboring countries. They are launching missiles from their territories into Israel. This is an Israeli kindergarten that was attacked, so civilians are being targeted. A really good way to get civilians is get a crowded city bus or the local neighborhood pizza joint on a Saturday night and send a suicide bomber in. So this is really, we really start seeing suicide bombers during the Second Intifada. With this widespread violence, again, leads to new talks. Lots of talking, not lots of action. It's called the Roadmap for Peace. And again, brokered by the American president, this time George W. Bush. And what they're saying is, okay, we need to stop the violence, and the settlements are the issue. These Jewish Israeli settlements, these neighborhoods in the West Bank, in the Gaza Strip, those will need to be evacuated in order to give the Palestinians a chance at their own country. So there's two perspectives on this. This is the Palestinian perspective, is they say, before 1948, we had all of this territory. Look at all of the green. We had all of that. There are a few Jewish settlements, that's it. And then with the partition plan, we lost a chunk. And then with the creation of the State of Israel, we lost even more. And then through the 6 Days War, through increasing settlements, look at how little we have. That is a valid argument. But here is the Israeli perspective. Look at 1967. Look at all the territory that we conquered through legitimate ways because we were defending ourselves. Look at what we have given back. We gave back the Sinai Peninsula. We have given back so much of the Gaza Strip and West Bank. Valid perspective. These two groups will probably never agree. And with the settlements, I mean, this still to this day is an issue. You have these suburbs, Jewish people, Israelis, living in these suburbs in the occupied territories. And they've now lived there for 20, 30 years. But the Israeli government, a few years ago, in the interest of trying to find peace, they actually force Israelis out of the settlements. They force them to leave. They say, this isn't great. We know for thousands of years we've been forced to pack up and leave, and you have to do it again. I'm sorry. But this is the only chance we have for peace. Then we have the Palestinian side that says, not only do we want you to evacuate, we want our own country. We don't want to be occupied. We want to have our territory back and have our own system. So this issue of self-determination comes up once again. However, the violence still continues. Israel is attacked on a daily basis from these other territories, sending missiles into Israel. And so Israel has developed a system called the Iron Dome. And it's this high-tech computer system that intercepts the missiles in midair before they can land on Israeli territory and kill Israelis. It's really, really cool, really high-tech. But it's sad that it's necessary because this tension still exists. So I don't know, there will possibly never be a solution because because there's all of this tension. Al-Qaeda is an extremist Muslim group. It was created in the late 80s by, of course, Osama bin Laden. And they never really made any secret whatsoever about what their goals were. They have said, I mean, if they were to give you a brochure, you would go to their homepage, they have said themselves that they're an international terrorist group dedicated to opposing non-Islamic governments with force and violence. So they say right up front, we're going to use these terror tactics, we are going to use violence because we hate the existence of non-Islamic governments, and especially the West interfering in the Middle East and with sort of traditionally Islamic countries. Again, like we just said before, part of the reason for this animosity goes back to American military presence in Saudi Arabia, and then also their involvement in Somalia, on the Horn of Africa. And so just this militant Islam, this extremism that has developed in the last few decades, now starts to have a greater impact. Al-Qaeda was, because it's involving this part of the world, Al-Qaeda does help the rebels in Chechnya. Remember we talked about this small group, this small area that belongs to Russia, and the growth of Islamic extremism. Remember, Russia has already tried to take over this territory back in the 1800s, and again more recently in the early 80s with Afghanistan. So from Al-Qaeda's perspective, it would actually be ideal if both Russia and America would end up fighting each other, sort of like the Cold War, and mutually assured destruction, because then that would ensure that they would eliminate each other and leave this region of the world alone. Osama bin Laden was originally from Saudi Arabia, incredibly wealthy family, almost like a prince. But as he starts to develop these increasingly radical ideas, he becomes a bit of an outsider from his family, and he actually hates what had happened in Saudi Arabia and how it was increasingly consumed with its own wealth and cooperation with the West. Bin Laden felt that Afghanistan was really the only truly Muslim country left in the world. Part of that is because it really had no formal national government. It was completely organized by clans or by tribes, and he felt that was a more traditional way of functioning. He just was upset about democracy trying to take hold in the region. He hated communism as well. He hated this idea that all Arabic countries should cooperate together. He wanted only Sharia law, or this strict Islamic law, to be the only thing that determines anything. In going to Afghanistan, in addition to its sort of traditional setup, the region is very mountainous, very rocky, not a lot of communication. So it was great for setting up these Al-Qaeda training camps. They're set up in Afghanistan, Pakistan, Somalia, and Kenya. And in addition to creating their own camps, they sort of create, I guess you could call them splinter cells or baby camps or satellite camps, because they want to recruit people to believe this radical idea and to be a part of their campaign to eliminate these Western threats through terror tactics. All of this is part of what we call jihad, or holy war. These really are radical Muslims. These are not sort of your everyday Muslim who is a part of a regular community. They are seen as fanatics by much of their own community. Bin Laden was disowned by his family. He was stripped of his Saudi Arabian citizenship because they said he was too extreme, he was too fanatic, he was too violent. Even though Al-Qaeda didn't necessarily like the idea of pan-Arabism, of all of these Arabic Islamic countries working together, they do have close ties with other terror organizations like Hezbollah or Hamas, we talked about in relationship to Israel, also with Iran. So we have these different terror organizations and countries connected to terrorism that are cooperating because they all see the West, or especially America, as a shared enemy. So we'll start to see some of this terrorism in different ways. It's not always related to Al-Qaeda, but it often is. When we really start to see this is in the early 80s. There's a number of attacks on the U.S. Embassy in Beirut, Lebanon. The concept of an embassy is that it is your country's sovereign soil that happens to be located somewhere else. So this was seen as a real blow to sort of American pride. American citizens are killed in each of these attacks. In this case, it was Hezbollah, the terror group from Lebanon. They are all done with car bombs. Excuse me, the first two are car bombs. The last one is a rocket-propelled grenade. And again, they are willing to risk their lives, especially with the car bombs, that they'll drive in and detonate the bomb themselves because they have this extreme belief, and they are inferior to the propagation of this belief. The belief is more important than the individual, and to them it is more of an honor to sacrifice their life in pursuit of this end goal. Next, in 1993, the World Trade Center is bombed by an Al-Qaeda trained bomber, Ramzi Youssef, I should say. Here we see the World Trade Center in downtown Manhattan. The North Tower, he uses again a truck bomb, drives it into the underground parking structure that is part of the World Trade Center compound, and it detonates on a timer. He ends up being found and put on trial. This attack kills 6 individuals, and over 1,000 are injured with smoke inhalation. So again, we see like, oh, well, they're just crazy Muslims. That was a very popular opinion. There are some people, though, who start to see the pattern and realizing that this organization will not stop in its attacks on America. There are more attacks in 1998 on more of our embassies, this time in East Africa. Again, remember some of those Al-Qaeda camps are in East Africa. Especially in Nairobi, this was seen as very bold. The American embassy is just across the street from the United Nations embassy. Again, truck bombers are used. They are suicide bombers this time. And both of these attacks were done simultaneously, and it was the 8th anniversary of American troops going into Saudi Arabia. So this clear connection to the Islamic extremism. Over 200 people are killed, 4,000 people are injured, and as a result, America then rebuilds these embassies with a degree of security that had really not been used before in American construction. Then in 2000, the USS Cole is attacked. It was in port in Yemen. It was refueling, sort of like in the boat parking lot, and a small boat pulls up, like a little dinghy almost, or almost like a rubber blow-up boat that has an outboard motor. Suicide bombers are in it. They pull up next to it, and you can see there the hole. 17 Americans are killed, 40 are injured. And so some people look at this series of events and say, oh, that's so unfortunate. And the government and the military really start to take note of Al-Qaeda and its extreme version of wanting to eliminate the West and the freedom that it stands for.